It's actually stopping for that stop sign now.
Well, Chris, if you think about how businesses operate, a lot of times if they had higher costs in the past year, they change their prices not every month. They might to do things like imposing tariffs that push up the price of imported goods. This time around, we're talking about more tariffs. We're talking about larger tariff hikes, and you're doing it in an economy that has higher inflation and where businesses have the experience of being able to push along price increases to their customers that they did not have 8 years ago.
I want to go back to tariffs in a minute, but Congressman, let's remember how easy Donald Trump said it would be for him. But prices rose a lot for eggs, 15.2% from December to January. That's the largest increase since June of 2015. Our NBC local team in LA is reporting that some Californians are actually turning to local farms to get eggs. Look at this long line of cars in Chino. They're snaking around the block just to try to find some eggs. I guess the key political question here is how long are people willing to wait for something that they were promised would happen on day one, which was 23 days ago?
That's right, Chris. And of course, the egg situation is exacerbated by the bird flu and all the chickens that have been killed. But at the end of the day, people don't care about those explanations, and we certainly saw that during the Biden administration. President Biden and his team continuously explained to the American people that inflation was better in the United States than the rest of the world, that our economy was stronger than the economies of the rest of the world, that his administration had passed the CHIPS Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. At the end of the day, people were frustrated by high prices, and that's something that now Donald Trump and Republicans are going to have to contend with. When people go to the polls in the fall of next year, this is the biggest question that's going to be on their minds. Did Trump and Republicans actually make inflation better? Did they make life more affordable in the United States? Right now, they're seeing how difficult that is, and these inflationary pressures aren't allowing interest rates to come down. And of course, that has a big effect on the rest of the economy and on businesses' plans for investment, for job creation. So this is the one issue. There's a lot out there, especially in this early going of the Trump administration, a lot to cover. But this is the one issue that politically will matter most.
That brings us back to tariffs, Nick. When Donald Trump said that this was going to be easy, this is a very complicated situation, but talk specifically about tariffs and how that could impact inflation.
Well, tariffs could send prices up. If they don't, the Trump administration argues that they won't send consumer prices up. They could send the dollar up, and what that would mean is that U.S. manufacturers, companies that export, it becomes more expensive for them to do that. It puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage. And, Trump's Treasury Secretary last year warned that tariffs were inflationary. He wrote this in a letter to his investors before he was really in the picture to become the Treasury Secretary. So there is some awareness, I think, inside the Trump administration that they've got different levers to pull here. They will argue that bringing down energy prices, that cutting government spending might help in the other direction, but it's just a more complicated situation right now than when we had tariffs in 2018 and 19.
And it's so interesting, I think, Carlos, that we're seeing pushback on the tariffs from Republican Senator Mitch McConnell. He even penned an op-ed writing for his local paper, quote, Kentuckians can't afford the high cost of Trump's tariffs. He even calls tariffs bad policy. He warned it could cost the average Kentuckian $1,200 a year. I wonder if you think the combination of the inflation report, the concern that a lot of Republicans are expressing over tariffs might serve as a warning to Donald Trump.
Well, not only that, Chris, but in the CBS News poll that's been covered this week, most Americans responded that they oppose tariffs against Canada and Mexico. More tolerance for tariffs against China. I think people understand that there's a competition issue there and that the Chinese really don't allow our companies to compete on a level playing field. But when it comes to our neighbors, people don't want those tariffs, and people are making the connection between tariffs and higher prices and inflation. So yes, I think the Trump administration is going to have to rethink the tariff strategy, especially if inflation remains persistent.
Christine Romans, Nick Timmerose, thank you both. Congressman, you're staying with me. In the meantime, we're following some breaking news out of the White House, announcing that an American citizen and 2 other detainees have been released by Belarus. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is in Washington. Now we're waiting for the White House press briefing to start. But in the meantime, what do we know about this, Gabe?
Hi there, Chris. Good afternoon. Well, we're just hearing from President Trump's envoy for hostages just a short time ago, saying that 3 detainees have been released, one of them being an American citizen. They were released from Belarus, and as we understand it, they are currently at the American Embassy in Lithuania. Again, that's breaking news just a few moments ago. That official just spoke with reporters at the White House North Lawn. Let's take a listen.
This morning, unilaterally stepping forward, and we don't even ask them. Or we say this would be interesting, and they come up with it. And so some of these things, I know, everybody thinks about deals here. The smartest thing you can do to curry favor with the President of the United States is bring Americans home. He's been clear about that.
Again, the White House stressing that this is another hostage release. Of course, that the one forward was released from Russia late yesterday, arrived at the White House overnight. And the White House is again stressing that it has brought home many hostages over the last several weeks, at least 10 so far. Now, Chris, Belarus, of course, a strong ally of Russia, and this comes after President Trump, a short time ago, also revealed that he had just spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone today, and that he plans to begin talks to potentially end the war in Ukraine. So a lot of developments on this front, but again, the breaking news, after hearing about Mark Fogel's release yesterday, now we're hearing that 3 detainees, including 1 American citizen, have been released by Belarus, Russia's neighbor. Chris.
Thank you so much, Gabe Gutierrez. If you're looking at your screen on the left, you see our Kelly O'Donnell, who's checking that door that leads into what's called lower press, waiting to see when the press secretary might come out. It might happen any minute now. And of course, we will be following it and make sure that we have all the latest news for you. But coming up in 90 seconds, the surprise Republican no vote for Tulsi Gabbard as the next DNI.
When emergency strikes, first responders are the first ones in. But on outdated networks, the crucial technology they depend on is limited. That's why T-Mobile created T-Priority, the only solution built for the 5G era that can dynamically dedicate up to 10 times the capacity for first responders. T-Priority, built for tomorrow's emergencies. Ready today.
Upset stomach? Ibirogast. Indigestion? Ibirogast. Bloating? Ibirogast. Thanks to a unique combination of herbs, Ibirogast helps relieve 6 digestive symptoms to help you feel better. 6 digestive symptoms, the power of nature. Ibirogast.
When I started Walton Goggins goggle glasses, I had no idea what I was doing. But GoDaddy Aero does, using AI to build a logo, website, and social content. So I can let the world know if your goggles ain't Goggins, they don't belong on your noggins.
Patients who have sensitive teeth but also want whiter teeth, they have to make a choice, one versus the other. Sensodyne Clinical White provides 2 shades whiter teeth as well as providing 24/7 sensitivity protection. Patients are going to love to see Sensodyne on the shelf.
We're standing up for our right to be lazy. by sitting down.
Emphasize that. Because we work hard and want to be hard. We, the lazy, are taking back lazy.
On our lazy boy furniture.
Lazy boy. Long live the lazy.
Breaking news, the Senate has just confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as the next Director of National Intelligence. The final vote was 52 to 48, with former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the only Republican joining Democrats to vote against her nomination. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is on Capitol Hill. Vaughn, McConnell didn't mince words. Talk about what we heard from him and others.
Right, Mitch McConnell is no longer the Senate Majority Leader. He's now just among the other Republican senators, and clearly with lesser sway than he once had in his 20 years atop the Republican conference here on the Senate side. But if you look at his statement here, he was the sole Republican no vote on Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence. And in his statement, he says, "The nation should not have to worry that the intelligence assessments the president receives are tainted by a Director of National Intelligence with a history of alarming lapses in judgment here." Of course, he also voted against the nomination of Pete Hegseth to head the Pentagon. And now there's a question of whether could Mitch McConnell be a no vote on the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., slated to take place in the 7 a.m. Eastern hour tomorrow morning. There is, for Mitch McConnell, a reality here that several days ago he had several falls, and he has been in a wheelchair here, clearly in a more fragile state. But at the same time, you were looking at the longtime Kentucky senator, much more forceful in his statements and speaking out in a willingness to take on President Trump and his administration, and clearly in his statement there saying that it is the role of the Senate to advise and consent, and that he said that Tulsi Gabbard, in his opinion, was not fit to head the U.S. intelligence agencies. Of course, though, he was the sole no vote, and by a 52 to 48 margin, Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed to be the next Director of National Intelligence. Chris.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you for that. And today, the first ever meeting of the House DOGE subcommittee, focusing on what it calls the war on waste in our federal government. While the committee agreed that there is waste to be cleaned up, they disagreed about almost everything else, including how to tackle it and who should do it.
While we're sitting here, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are recklessly and illegally dismantling the federal government.
This will not be a subcommittee dedicated to making government efficient for everyday people. It's about helping Elon Musk and Donald Trump be as efficient as possible in robbing our government.
I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that the Republicans believe our job is, because right now they have relinquished their constitutional duties over to an unelected bureaucrat.
Joining me now, NBC's Ryan Nobles, who's on Capitol Hill for us, and Congressman Carlos Curbelo is back. Okay, Ryan, Chairwoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says this hearing is, I'm quoting, the first battle in the war against bureaucracy, but tell us what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think you played a pretty good microcosm of what's gone on in this hearing today. We don't expect this to be a very cooperative committee, a very bipartisan committee. Clearly, Republicans and Democrats have very different views as to how this department and government efficiency is going to operate. Democrats feel as though Donald Trump has empowered Elon Musk in a way that no other government employee of the executive branch has ever been empowered, while Republicans view him as somebody that's coming in and shaking things up and taking a look at these budgets and these processes in a way that no one has before, and that is needed because there's too much money being spent and it's not being spent in the right places. I think where you're going to see Democrats hone in their message, particularly in hearings like these, is to say that we're not opposed to finding ways to make government work better, but Elon Musk can't just go in and unilaterally decide that he's going to shut these things down. If he finds examples of waste, fraud, and abuse, bring them to Congress and we'll zero out those budgets, or we'll change them through the constitutional process. Where Democrats have a real problem right now is that he's just unilaterally going in without much authority, I guess tacit approval from Donald Trump, and saying, let's get rid of this. In particular, you look at the program of USAID or the Consumer Financial Protection Program. And so that, Democrats don't have a lot of power to stop this right now, Chris, but what they can do is use forums like the one that we see this morning in this hearing, where they can voice those concerns and bring them out to the rest of the American public.
So, Congressman, he wasn't there, but Elon Musk, again, did dominate the conversation. And while Republicans defended his role in the administration, you saw a little bit of it. Democrats were in attack mode.
We are the Oversight Committee. We are the People's House for the United States of America. We represent the American people. And so, Mr. Elon Musk, if you would like to appear in front of the Oversight Committee, you have been duly invited. Please, come tell us what you're doing. Come testify in front of the American people. And please, come hold yourself to account.
I mean, Democrats could subpoena, right? I mean, but they can't really force Musk to come answer questions, can they? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, Chris, this is a complicated situation for Democrats because they're attacking the process. They're attacking the how, not so much the what, because the what is fairly popular. I think the average American probably thinks that the government can be reformed, can be made more efficient, and the idea of someone from the private sector going in and cleaning things up, so to speak, is fairly popular. So Democrats really have to be precise in their opposition here. They have to make arguments about transparency, maybe about Elon Musk having too much power. And I think the strategy of inviting him to testify is pretty smart, although to be fair, Elon Musk did take questions from the press for almost an hour yesterday and answered most of the questions that were asked of him. So this is a difficult situation.
Well, I think people would argue there are answers and there are responsive answers, right? So, and no indication he would, even if he went before a committee, answer them any differently. That's part of the problem as well. But look, we talk about how divided this Congress is. We've been talking about it for a while, to be honest. But today there was something maybe we haven't seen so much. Let me play another moment from that hearing.
Now, I find it ironic, of course, that our chairwoman, Congresswoman Green, is in charge of running this committee. Now, in the last Congress, Chairwoman Green literally showed a dick pic in our oversight congressional hearing, so I thought I'd bring one as well. Now, this, of course, we know is President Elon Musk. He's also the world's richest man.
You served in Congress. What are voters to make of this?
Look, this is the kind of episode that really just frustrates people, that makes people just disillusioned with politics. It's the reason that we see all of these drastic swings in the electorate, Chris, with every election being a rejection of the party in power, because people actually want to see Republicans and Democrats find common ground, treat each other with decency and respect, and try to do things collaboratively for the American people. So, that's how this Congress is going to go. I think come November of next year, there will probably be a very aggressive response by the electorate, and we will continue seeing the pendulum swing back and forth.
In the meantime, it was just 4 years ago, Carlos, that Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene was stripped of all her committee assignments. Now she's chairing this subcommittee. Greene told Punchbowl News, "I wouldn't say that I've changed. I would say it's the House that's changed, and they figured out I am a person who takes this seriously because people do, and so does President Trump." But I wonder, as you watch this, is the fact that she is now in a leadership position kind of a microcosm of how much Donald Trump has reordered, reinvented Washington and Congress?
It says a lot about where the Republican Party has been and where it has landed here in 2025. It also reminds us that Speaker Johnson has 2 or 3 votes that he can afford to lose, so he really has to give everyone kind of what they want and not marginalize anyone. We did see previous speakers like John Boehner and others marginalize certain members, punish them for misconduct. That's really difficult to do when you don't have very many votes to spare. But yes, it is also an indication of how populist the Republican Party has come. A great departure from the Republican Party of Reagan and the Bushes.
Carlos Curbelo, Ryan Nobles, gentlemen, thank you so much. And coming up, new details about the prisoner swap that led to the release of American schoolteacher Mark Fogel, who the U.S. is now handing over to Russia in exchange.
Prilosec knows for a fire, 1 fire extinguisher beats 10 buckets of water. And for 0 heartburn, 1 Prilosec a day beats taking up to 10 antacids a day. It's that simple. For 24-hour heartburn relief, 1 beats 10. Prilosec OTC.
Want a next level clean? Swish with the whoa of Listerine. It kills 99.9% of bad breath germs for 5 times more cleaning power than brushing and flossing alone. Get a next level clean with Listerine. Feel the whoa.
And Doug.
You'll be back! Emus can't help people customize and save hundreds on car insurance with Liberty Mutual. You're just a flightless bird!
No, he's a dreamer, Frank.
Well, I'll be. That bird really did it. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
This is the American economy. Economy. Perhaps they need to call it something else.
So sick.
Are you okay?
I'm incredible. So many in-network dogs, off dogs. This one never rushes appointments, and that one makes patients feel heard. But
You've got options. Book now.
Dexcom G7 sends your glucose numbers to your phone and watch, so you can always see where you're heading without finger sticks. Dexcom G7 is the most accurate CGM, so you can manage your diabetes with confidence.
Want a next level clean? Swish with the whoa of Listerine. It kills 99.9% of bad breath germs for 5 times more cleaning power than brushing and flossing alone. Get a next level clean with Listerine. Feel the whoa.
What do you got there, Larry? Time machine? You gonna go back and see how the pyramids were built or something?
Nope. Ellen and I want to go on vacation, so I'm going to go back to last week and buy a winning lottery ticket.
Can I come?
Only room for one.
How am I getting home?
Sitting on my lap like last time, Ronald.
Fine, but I'm bringing this.
All right.
Or you could try one of these savings options.
The right money moves aren't as far-fetched as you think.
There it is. See? Those are going to all work out.
Thanks, Rich, for me.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking, maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I'm skeptical. So I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies. Or call 1-800-513-7100. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
Certain this is going to work?
Nothing.
For imprint certain?
Certainty matters. ForImprint is your home for promo gear to wow clients and inspire your team. Check out ForImprint.com.
ForImprint, for certain. How'd you do that?
It's complicated.
It's easy. Pick more or less and at least 2 players into your lineup and lock in for the game.
Download the PrizePicks app today. Enter $5 and get $50 instantly with code TV.
I could have told you that. I first told you.
The first 100 days. It's a critical time for our country. And Rachel Nyland is on 5 nights.
Now is the time, so we're going to do it. Settle in.
Rachel Nyland.
Should wait. We're almost back.
On MSNBC. MSNBC presents a new original podcast hosted by Jen Psaki, featuring Sheila guests explore how the Democratic Party is facing this political moment and where it's headed next. The Blueprint with Jen Psaki. Listen now.
We're keeping very close to the White House press briefing and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt because we're waiting to hear if she has anything to say about this newly discovered call President Trump having, this lengthy and highly productive phone call, he says, with Vladimir Putin. Their first reported direct conversation since Trump came back into office. In a social media post, the president said the two leaders agreed to visit each other's countries and that they would have their respective teams begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine immediately. In fact, we're just learning that could happen as soon as this week. Just moments ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed he also had a meaningful conversation with Trump today. And earlier, NBC News
great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to DOGE. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what DOGE is doing. There is an X account with the DOGE handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that DOGE found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that DOGE identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one, $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that DOGE is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what DOGE is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to DOGE. And I also have a DOGE daily report, if anybody would like it, on all of the things that they are identifying and finding. We're happy to provide this information to you. We're talking about it every single day.
Are all those things you just mentioned fraud, or are they waste, or are they just contrary to the president's policies?
I would argue that all of these things are fraudulent, they are wasteful, and they are an abuse of the American taxpayer's dollar. This is not what the government should be spending money on. It's contrary to the president's priorities and agenda. And again, we can continue to provide you the receipts for all of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And if anybody in here wants to argue that the federal government is not fraudulent in some capacity, be my guest, because I think the American people watching at home would beg to differ. Mary.
More on the judges. Does the White House believe the courts have the authority to issue these nationwide injunctions?
We believe that the injunctions that have been issued by these judges have no basis in the law and have no grounds, and we will, again, as the president said very clearly yesterday, comply with these orders, but it is the administration's position that we will also ultimately be vindicated, and the president's executive actions that he took were completely within the law, they were constitutional, and we look forward to the day where he can continue to implement his agenda. And I would just add, it's our view that this is the continuation of the weaponization of justice that we have seen against President Trump. He fought it for 2 years on the campaign trail. It won't stop him now. Brian.
I want to go back to DOGE just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion of improper payments. Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, the people who should not have gotten it. Some of this group might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that DOGE is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that DOGE is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 77 million people elected him to do. James.
First, the statement that was released after this morning's phone calls identified Mr. Witkoff as the special envoy who will be part of the delegation that undertakes to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. I had thought that that individual was General Snark, so can you clear that up?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you mentioned, the president is truth following the phone call of Vladimir Putin, said that he has asked Secretary of State Rubio, the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, our national security advisor here at the White House, Michael Watts, and Steve Woodcock to lead the negotiations. As for General Pete Kellogg, he remains a critical part of this team in this effort. He's played a tremendous role in getting the negotiations to this point, and he's very much still part of the Trump administration.
I took note of President Trump's comments in his Super Bowl interview with our colleague Brett Baer to the effect that he wants to do a deal with Iran. However, that interview appeared after the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had already ruled out any additional negotiations with the United States. So kind of a two-part question. A, what gives the president any confidence that Iran will come to the table? And B, more fundamentally, why is the president interested in doing a deal with Iran instead of doing everything he can, perhaps short of U.S. military intervention, to try and hasten the end of what many of his own supporters regard as an evil regime?
Well, the president has made it very clear that he will never allow Iran to have nuclear capabilities. That is a red line that he has drawn, and he will not allow that to happen. But you asked why President Trump wants to make a deal. I would remind you, he's the master of the art of the deal. He is America's deal maker in chief. He leads from a position of securing peace through strength. And I think time and time again already, in just 4 weeks, we have seen the president being able to negotiate successful deals with our partners, our adversaries, all around this world. The release of Mark Fogel just last night is something that I think speaks to the president's deal-making ability. This is something that the Biden administration allegedly tried to do for 3.5 years. I think you all should go back and ask some of those Biden administration officials what they even tried to do and why weren't they successful, because for 3.5 years Mark Fogel sat in a Russian prison, and it took President Trump 3 weeks to get him back on American soil. There's nobody better at making deals than Donald Trump. Phil Wegman.
Thank you. Two foreign policy questions. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said through the war he wants NATO membership for nuclear weapons. We heard Defense Secretary Hegseth say that NATO membership was unrealistic. What's the president's view on the other option on a nuclear Ukraine?
I have not talked to President Trump about Ukraine's NATO membership or their nuclear capabilities. I would leave it to him to discuss. But I will tell you again that Secretary Rubio and also the Vice President, J.D. Vance, will be meeting directly with President Zelensky in Munich on Friday. And I'm sure they will provide a readout of that conversation and that discussion.
Question. Given that this administration has called on Europe to take more responsibility for their own defense, I'm wondering, will the EU or any other European nation other than Ukraine be involved in these peace talks?
I don't have any European nations who are involved currently to read out for you. Certainly, the president has employed a very strong team or deployed a very strong team to continue these negotiations. And the fact that he was on the phone with both President Putin and President Zelensky today shows that he's very much involved in this effort as well.
Well, I guess, should we expect the president to negotiate in person with Zelensky?
I don't have anything to read out on that for you today. Maggie, good to see you.
You talked about the transparency with DOGE and Elon Musk's press availability yesterday. There is a conflict of interest law in place that says that people who have personal interests can't interact with government entities that can touch on those. Has President Trump signed a waiver for Elon Musk? Does such a thing exist? If it does, will you guys release it in the interest of transparency that he's committed to?
I have not seen the law that you are referring to. What I can tell you is that Elon Musk, as I've confirmed before, is a special government employee. He is filing the proper financial disclosure, and he is complying with all applicable federal laws. As you also heard Elon address this directly yesterday in the alleged conflict of interest, and he said everything he's doing is very public, and if you all perceive a conflict of interest, you're welcome to bring that up. And as the president said, if he feels like Elon is engaging in something that's a conflict of interest, he will tell Elon not to do that. And Elon also said yesterday that before he moves forward with anything, he consults with the President of the United States. So we're very confident with the ethics and the guardrails that have been put in place here. Caitlin.
Thanks, Caroline. I have a few things for you, but on the commitment by President Trump, he said that he and President Putin agreed to visit each other's respective nations. Are there any preconditions that President Trump has President Putin must do before he goes and meets with him, withdrawing some forces, withdrawing all forces, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but I was just talking with the president in our national security team. I wasn't made aware of any conditions, but if they exist, I'm happy to provide those.
And on the president himself, he styles himself as this master negotiator. He is now deploying these negotiations, saying that they start immediately. We did hear from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, though, today, saying that NATO membership is not realistic for Ukraine, and neither is returning to pre-2014 borders. Aren't they giving away bargaining chips before these negotiations have even started?
Again, I haven't talked to the president about Ukraine's NATO membership, and he appointed several individuals to negotiate on his behalf. He's directly involved in these negotiations as well, and I'm sure if you ask him that question in the near future, when you're able to, he'll give you an answer. I just don't want to get ahead of him on it.
And final thing for you, which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus. Many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because there's a reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the geographical identification name server. And Apple has recognized that, Google has recognized that, pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America.
Not if you're
and it's
in
very
another
important
country,
to this
it doesn't.
administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. The prisoner exchange with Russia coming at the same time as the president is now announcing negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. The timing of that is hard to ignore. Was Ukraine discussed as part of this prisoner's law?
I was not involved in those discussions, so I can't comment on whether that came up or not. What I can say is that this was a very good deal for the United States of America and for the rest of the world. As you know, we have confirmed that the Russian who will be returning home very soon, Alexander Vinnik, was a non-violent crypto criminal, and as part of this exchange, he has forfeited more than $100 million that he obtained in that illegal crime. And in exchange, of course, we got Mark Fogel, who is a middle school teacher who kissed the American soil, but kissed the ground last night when he returned to the United States of America. It was a great deal and a great day for our country, and I think everybody, regardless of political affiliation, agrees with that.
And was Russia made aware ahead of time of the parameters that the administration and Secretary Hegseth was going to be announcing today?
The NATO perimeters? I'm not sure. You have to ask Secretary Hegseth and the Defense Department on that, since he announced them. Jackie.
Hi. Just to be clear, so when we're listening for a shift in position on U.S. policy, should we only listen to the president and maybe not the Secretary of Defense? Because what he outlined today would represent a shift in U.S. policy.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I speak for the President of the United States behind this podium, and I will let him discuss that.
Any more about the next hostage releases? I understand that Americans coming out today.
Sure, I'm glad you asked. It speaks to President Trump's deal-making ability, and we can confirm the safe release of one American and two individuals from Belarus, one of whom worked for Radio Liberty. Out of respect for the privacy of these individuals, their request, we have no further details to announce on their identities, but we can confirm that one American was released today, and it's a remarkable victory on the heels of Mark Fogel returning to America last night.
On who the U.S. might be releasing in exchange?
I don't have details on that at this moment. I don't have details on that at this moment. I do know that these three individuals have been released and are on their way home to their respective countries. Legion.
Thank you so much. Can you explain how President Trump envisions the war in Russia and Ukraine coming to an end? Does he expect Ukraine to hand over all the territory in question?
Again, these negotiations are ongoing. I will allow the president to divulge any red lines that he may set, but I think as deals in the past have come to fruition, the president has proven one of the things that makes him a very effective negotiator is not revealing what he's anticipating from both sides, but he is at the forefront of these negotiations in addition to the very qualified individuals who he's tasked with speaking to both President Putin and President Zelensky.
Speaking of deals, a meeting with the President of the United States offers any foreign leader credibility. Was it part of the prisoner swap with Fogel that President Trump agreed to meet with Putin?
Again, I was already asked this question. I said I was not made aware of that, but we can certainly get you an answer on that. I'll check in with the NSC. Sure, Monica.
Thanks, Caroline. It's clear that this administration is dedicated to both truth and transparency. We know that with DOGE, but we also know that because this administration recently announced it's going to declassify the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, and RFK. I'm wondering, is it likely that we're going to see more information regarding the assassination attempts on the president's life while he was on the campaign trail?
In regards to the assassination of the individuals you mentioned, President Trump signed that executive order directing the respective agencies to do it. I know that that process continues and is ongoing. He's committed to transparency and the declassification of these very important files that I think many Americans are not only interested in learning about, but also have the right to know about. As for the two heinous assassination attempts on the president's life, he's spoken to this publicly. I've spoken to him about it privately, and as he said publicly to all of you, he feels he has a right to know about further information about the individuals who tried to kill him, tried to take his life. And so, if and when we get that information, I'll leave it up to the president to decide whether or not he would like to reveal it. But I believe in the effort of transparency that we've seen consistently from this president, he certainly will. Daniel.
Thanks, Caroline. I want to ask you about the $59 million that FEMA sent to New York City migrant hotels. Secretary Kristi Noem just put out a statement saying that she clawed back the full payment that FEMA activists unilaterally gave to NYC migrant hotels. She wrote, "Mark my words, there will not be a single penny spent that goes against the interest and safety of the American people." What does the response of the Trump administration send to any federal bureaucrats that are thinking about obstructing the president's agenda?
They will be held accountable. The president is signing executive orders daily, and he expects all officials across the administration, regardless if they are a political appointee or if they are a career bureaucrat, to adhere to the will of the American people and the 77 million Americans who re-elected President Trump. He's here for a reason, and he is focused every day on implementing his administration's goals, and sending $59 million to a migrant hotel to house illegal immigrants when there are still people in North Carolina and California who have not received FEMA funding is not something that this administration is going to tolerate. Deanna.
Thank you so much, Caroline. One on New York.